Hello, and welcome back to Terri Reid's Attic, a place where we share stories of things that go bump in the night. Sit back, get comfortable, and enjoy the stories. In this episode, I'd like to talk about dreams. Dreams are interesting places our minds go when we're sleeping. Full moons always bring with them my craziest dreams. But lately, it seems that all of my dreams have been full technicolor and awfully weird. Is that happening to anyone else out there? But I don't think dreams are just our subconscious getting to drive the car. I think when we're in that REM sleep, when our natural defenses are at their lowest, we might be more susceptible to messages from the other side. I've learned over the years, the more we're open to something, the more likely we are to have experiences. My paranormal experience increased when I started writing about ghosts. But many people just aren't open. And so if you're someone on the other side wanting to get their attention, you might just have to wait until they're asleep. One of my favorite dream stories was told to me by a woman who had read my ghost stories in the local paper and was willing to share her experience with me. She told me that she and her mother had been best friends. If they weren't visiting at each other's homes, they were on the phone with each other. They would chat on the phone every day. She then explained that when her mother passed away, she not only lost her mother, but she lost her best friend. She went into severe depression. She wouldn't leave her home, wouldn't call her friends, was even distant from her own family. She was sinking, but she didn't know how to stop. One night, she had a dream that changed her life. In her dream, her phone rang. Now, this is back in the day when phones were attached to the walls by wires, and there were several phones in different places around the house. In her dream, the phone on the nightstand rang. She reached over and picked it up. Her mother was on the other line. She told her daughter that she was fine. She was in a great place, and the only thing that was making her sad was watching her daughter waste her life grieving for her. She wanted her daughter to live her life to the fullest, to enjoy every day, to laugh more and cry less, and for heaven's sakes, move on in her life. She said the phone call was like old times. She cried with her mom, but listened to her good advice. And the sleep she had after that was the most peaceful sleep she'd had in a long time. However, the next morning when she woke up and remembered the dream, she discovered that her phone receiver was laying on the pillow next to her. Was it more than just a dream? The second story I'd like to share happened to me. Because of the distance and other circumstances, I never really got to know my grandparents on my mother's side. I probably visited with my grandfather 3 times before he died. I knew my grandmother a little better because when she was older, she moved in with my mom. But my interaction with her was probably limited to about a dozen visits or so. She lived in Arizona with my mother when she passed away. And because of circumstances, I couldn't go to the funeral. But I really didn't know her. So my grief was more for my mother's loss than my own. About 2 weeks after she died, I had a dream. In the dream, I was searching for my 2 youngest daughters. They were just toddlers at the time. I remember searching our big old farmhouse, checking every room and calling out their names. Finally, I climbed the steps to the attic. At that time, the attic wasn't finished, so it was just a big room with bare rafters and a wooden floor. I got about halfway up the stairs and saw my 2 little girls playing next to the brick chimney. The odd thing was that they were playing in a pool of bright sunshine, but there were no windows close by, and there was just solid roof above them. Then I turned to my left and saw my grandmother standing about 5 feet away. She was dressed all in white, and she was watching my daughters. I climbed the rest of the way up the stairs and walked over to her. She was very petite, maybe about 5 feet tall, and I am 5'8", so I felt like a gargantuan standing next to her. I put my arm around her shoulders, but she didn't do anything to acknowledge my presence. She just kept watching the girls. I then said something inane. Even in my dreams, I knew it was inane, like, "So sorry to hear about your death." She didn't say anything, but really, what is the appropriate response for that kind of comment? Anyway, thank goodness I woke up right after that, sat up in my bed and thought, whoa, that was a weird dream. Then I went back to sleep and dreamed the entire dream all over again. The next morning, I called my mom in Arizona and told her about my dream. After I was finished, my mother started crying. She explained to me that just before my grandmother had died, she had told my mom that her greatest wish was that she could be a guardian angel for her great-grandchildren. I guess she got her wish. These next stories I want to share with you were sent to me by a wonderful woman who lives in the Netherlands. Her name is Dineke, and her family calls her Didi. She has had some amazing experiences with dreams and has generously offered to share those experiences with us. Thank you, Didi. Here are her stories. When my husband and I were young and not together for very long, we sometimes fantasized about the future. How many children, girls and boys, and what should we name them? We decided Ashley if it was a girl and Andy if it was a boy. So when we finally got married, we wanted to start our family right away. Within 1 month, I was expecting, and after 4 months, we heard that we would have a son. But totally, for me, unexpectedly, I absolutely didn't want to call this boy Andy. We went looking for a different name and ended up with Dylan. But when our son was about 1.5 years old, I suddenly had a dream, or you could call it a nightmare. I remember it felt very real. Sometimes when you dream about your own home, you know it's your home, but it doesn't always look exactly like it should. That happened in this dream. I walked into a room, and a boy sat on the floor with his back to the wall, his head bowed and his knees pulled up to his chin, with his arms around his legs. He sobbed, and I went to him and asked him why he was crying. He looked at me, and I saw that it was my child. I grabbed him and let him cry with me. This child was my child. He looked a bit like Dylan, but then he seemed much older. I woke up crying. This was so sad. He was crying so much. I wanted to help him, but that was not possible at all. I've been pretty upset about this, but because it was a dream, I just tried to forget about it. A few years later, my husband and I visited our sister with our now 3 children. A few days later, my sister suddenly called me in the morning, quite upset. She had dreamed that night we were all visiting her for that birthday. Only this time there was a boy sitting on the other side of the living room, crying alone. So she walked over there and asked, "Sweetie, what is going on?" He looked at her, and she too realized that this was my child. And then he said, "Aunt, it's me, Andy. Why doesn't anyone see me?" She hugged him and told him that we loved him, and then she woke up. Anyway, she picked up the phone and called me. She asked me about the name we would have given if we had had a boy. I said Andy. Carefully, she started crying and told her story. And I too started crying, knowing that she didn't know about my dream. In the years following, special things happened at our home. For example, Dylan had a toy, a sort of house with a gate where cars could drive through. It was Dylan's favorite thing to do. That toy seemed to be everywhere in our house. On the table, under the table, on the cupboard, in the play corner, on the small table. One evening after we had cleaned everything up, I was looking for this house. I could not find it anywhere. Dylan was sleeping, so my husband and I went looking. We had searched for more than a half an hour, but had not found it anywhere, so gave up and sat down. Later in the evening, when we went to bed, we walked towards the stairs, and in the corner of our eyes, we saw the house on the totally empty floor in front of the table. We looked at each other and realized that we had constantly walked back and forth over that place, but that house had really not been there. I started drawing around the time when our youngest two turned 8. I wanted to learn to draw faces, so I followed an instruction online. I followed the right lines and tried to get the shadows right. In the end, it didn't work out as I had in my mind. I tore up the drawing and set it aside. A few minutes later, my youngest son walks in and takes the pile of paper. He looked at me and said, "Wow, how beautiful." So I looked at the drawing and indeed saw that the face had become very beautiful without the rest of the head. So I said, "Very nice, but I've already torn it up." He took my drawing pad and glue and stuck the piece of torn paper on a new page and said, "So, well, you can finish it." Surprised and laughing, I started finishing the drawing. I just thought it was a shame because the face was sad and not happy like the drawing I had tried to draw. I saved the drawing, and only a month ago I saw the drawing again while I was sorting out my drawings. My heart stopped. I looked at the drawing, and it seemed to be a combination of my youngest son and my oldest son. I had drawn a child who was very similar to my children, and he was sad. I named my drawing Andy. This is her next story. I dream a lot. Light dreams, shreds of dreams, exciting dreams, strong dreams, happy dreams. Often dreams are things that you process in the night, things that you have seen, done, or what is yet to come. My dreams are often slightly different. In the morning, I realized that this dream in particular was different, and that I had seen something very special. But very often I wake up completely confused and sad. These dreams started about when I was 18 years old. I'm going to tell about the most special and unique dream. Sometimes I don't know what they mean, and sometimes they seem like a message. Here in the Netherlands, we are used to visiting each other's houses when there are birthdays of family members. It used to be that our living room was filled to the brim. Similarly, at my grandfather's and grandmother's house, my father's parents, we celebrated birthdays with lots of people. Uncles, aunts, great uncles, old aunts. The room was full of people, cigarette smoke, that was very normal at the time, and drinking. Anyway, the years passed, and my grandfather died. And many years and birthdays later, my grandmother died too. It was sad that my father unfortunately also died of cancer in 2010. He was only 53 years old. Eventually, the birthdays changed, and we only occasionally saw each other. This time I dreamed that my children and I, because my husband worked in my dream, were on our way to my grandfather's birthday party. It was his birthday, and this was going to be a big party. In my dream, everything went wrong. I missed the train and the bus. The children did not walk quickly, something that all mothers sometimes experience when you have to be somewhere on time. But eventually, I arrived at a huge building. I knew that the party was being celebrated at the top of the building, and I quickly went upstairs with the escalator. The floors passed, and I finally reached the right floor. I looked around and saw that everyone was already there. My mother, brothers and sisters with families, uncles, aunts, and my grandfather was talking to my uncle, smoking a cigarette and drinking a drink. I walked over to him, gave him a hug, and of course congratulated him on his birthday. I heard his laughter and smelled his cologne. I told him that I was so happy to see him and that I had missed him terribly. I then continued to greet the rest of the family. The more I walked past the tables, the more it dawned on me that it was filled with family members who had already died, even great uncles and great aunts. Surprised, I said hello to everyone with kisses and hugs. I talked and walked to my mother. My mother grabbed me by my hands. She seemed cheerful but upset and said, "Honey, I have a surprise." She stepped aside and my father stepped forward. I saw my father standing in front of me, the same face, hands closed. I nearly fell to my knees with sadness and happiness. I held him and cried to him. And then I tried to tell him completely about my life since 2010 when he had died. I even had to introduce him to my two youngest children. He had never seen them before. And of course my eldest, who he had the special connection with, hugged the life out of him. The dream suddenly stopped because my husband woke me up. I was so sad. I didn't want to stop dreaming at all. My husband said that I was crying and moving terribly in my sleep. Sobbing, I told my husband about my dream and was very upset that morning. But as usual, I got over it. This was a dream, and a very beautiful dream, but just a dream. Later in the morning, I found a moment for myself, went to drink some tea and turned on Facebook. I looked at the stories of families and friends on Facebook, something I do every morning. Suddenly a message came from my aunt. She had placed a photo of my grandfather at his desk. She had placed it in honor of his birthday. He would have been 99 years old that day. I looked surprised, not knowing what day it was. That was very coincidental, isn't it? I looked up the date of that day, and it was indeed the 4th of March, my grandfather's birthday. It slowly dawned on me. I was at my grandfather's birthday party last night. I will never know if this was just a good dream or the truth, but how special is it that I had this dream exactly on his birthday? And how nice is the idea that they have never left, but just keep celebrating their birthdays up there together like that. I love that idea, so I stick to it. I was invited to a very special birthday celebration. Next 4th of March, he would be 100 years old. Now I am curious, will I be invited again? Dee Dee's final story isn't a dream, but a real ghost story. Our previous house was a bit weird. On the ground floor, there was a kitchen, computer room, and toilet. On the first floor was our living room. On the second floor, 2 bedrooms and the bathroom. And the third floor, 1 large attic room. My husband and I were sitting on the couch watching television in the living room. It was 11 o'clock in the evening, and we were ready to go to bed. I finished reading something on my phone, and in the meantime, my husband joked by turning off the light and went downstairs to close up and go to the bathroom, something he did every night. Still looking at my phone, I saw him walking down the stairs from the corner of my eye. Upstairs on the second floor, opposite the stairs, was my son's bedroom, and our room was to the right of it. If you walked up the stairs in the evening, you would see that his light was on, and his bed under the light was against the wall, and my son was sleeping well. But something strange happened this evening. I went up the stairs and looked straight at his room. Suddenly I could see Lex, my husband, standing from behind, leaning over Dylan. I was surprised he was upstairs, but still I walked on. Lex turned to the side and walked to the window out of my sight. Totally surprised, wondering why he did that, I stopped on the stairs and asked, "Lex?" I didn't get an answer. It made me nervous, afraid that he would scare me for fun, so I shouted a little more forcefully, "Lex!" A voice came up from the toilet. Lex shouted that he was downstairs. I think I stood there for half a minute to process what had happened, and when I realized that there was someone in our house, I yelled, "Lex!" half panicked, because if he was downstairs, who was up here? Lex came running upstairs while I was stuck with fear. He ran into the room and saw nothing. "Nothing to see, Dineke. What did you see?" I told him what I had seen, and he understood that it was really scary and weird. But then again, with all the weird things that happen, you brush it off. It must be my imagination, right? By the way, I never found out who this man was. I'm so grateful to Dineke for sharing these great stories. I hope you all enjoyed them as much as I did. Sweet dreams. Thank you for stopping by Terri Reid's Attic. If you enjoyed the stories, please click like and please subscribe. And please look below for links and more videos. Until next time, from ghoulies and ghosties and long-legged beasties and things that go bump in the night, dear Lord, protect us.